So what if the real key to our mental health was found over 100 years ago, but then the person who found it just walked away? Well, today we are diving into a huge, unresolved debate left behind by none other than Carl Jung. It's a debate that puts his most famous ideas head-to-head with the very foundation of modern therapy.
The path he eventually took, well, it defined his entire legacy. But here's the big question. What if he took a wrong turn? We're going to unpack that, because the answer completely changes how we think about healing and personal growth today.
Okay, first, let's get on the same page about where therapy is at right now. And you might be surprised to hear there's a huge consensus. It doesn't matter if we're talking about CBT, psychodynamics, or something else. Pretty much every major school of thought agrees on one core thing. Your mental well-being all comes down to your ability to regulate your emotions.
Yeah, from this modern point of view, issues like anxiety or depression aren't these big, scary mysteries. They're seen as breakdowns in this one crucial skill. So the goal of therapy becomes super clear. Help people get better at managing their own emotional world. This is, without a doubt, the bedrock of modern practice.
Now, this is where it gets really interesting. 100 years ago, a young, brilliant Carl Jung was a pioneer in this exact area. Seriously, the early work that put him on the map, that made him famous, it was all about the incredible power of our emotions and these things he called complexes bubbling just under the surface.
So what's a complex? For Jung, these were these little knots of feelings and memories, usually formed from tough experiences in our early relationships. And these knots could basically hijack our thinking. If you translate that to today's language, he was describing, spot on, a failure of emotion regulation that was rooted in our connections with other people.
But then, he got to a fork in the road, and he made a choice that changed everything. Jung famously pivoted. He turned away from studying emotions and relationships. Instead, he spent the rest of his life developing his theory of archetypes, these universal, inherited patterns that he believed shaped us all from the inside. And that decision, right there, is the start of this whole debate.
So while Jung was off exploring this deep, internal, mythical world, a totally different revolution was kicking off in psychology. This one wasn't based on myths, it was based on modern biology. And the irony? This new science would bring us right back to the very ideas Jung had decided to leave behind. You had these incredible new fields popping up, things like affective neuroscience, which actually maps the emotional pathways in our brain, and attachment research, which showed just how critical that bond is between a baby and their caregiver. And they all started pointing to the same powerful conclusion. And that conclusion just shatters this old idea of the isolated mind. The evidence became totally overwhelming. Our minds aren't these self-contained little boxes. Our entire inner world, who we are, is built piece by piece through our connections to other people. This all led to this really cool concept of the social brain. It turns out we're not born with a bunch of pre-programmed behaviors. Nope. Our genes basically prime us to be super sensitive to social interaction. Our brains are quite literally wired for connection from the moment we're born.
Just think about our basic emotions for a second. They aren't just these private feelings we have inside. They are ancient biological signals. Anger tells us to set a boundary. Sadness pushes us to find comfort. They're designed to make us do something, usually to reach out to other people to get our needs met. Emotions are, by their very nature, relational.
Okay, so here's where it all comes to a head. We've got two completely different ways of looking at the human mind. On one side, you have Jung's later model of archetypes, and on the other, you have all this powerful new evidence from modern science. They are two competing visions for how we become who we are and how we heal.
Let's break it down. Jung's model is what you might call inside out. The idea is that your personality just unfolds from an internal blueprint, these archetypes. He even used a fancy word for it, autochtthonous, which just means self-generating. But the modern relational model, that's outside in. It says the self is built, almost from scratch, through all our interactions, especially with our first caregivers.
And you can see this inside-out thinking so clearly in Jung's own words. He asks if a marriage allows you to live your true nature and gives the other person freedom for their individuation. See? For him, a relationship doesn't create you, it's just a space that hopefully doesn't mess up the development that's already happening on the inside. So why do we care about any of this?
Because this isn't just some dusty academic debate. It leads to two totally different ideas about what should actually be happening in a therapist's office.
Modern relational therapy has really concrete goals. It's about building tangible skills. First, learning to handle your emotions. Second, understanding your own mind and the minds of others. That's a skill called mentalization. And third, developing a real sense of control in your own life. And here's the kicker. You don't learn this from a textbook. These skills are built inside the relationship with the therapist.
Jung's goal, on the other hand, was pretty different. He called it individuation. This is a much more philosophical, internal journey. It's about integrating all those unconscious archetypes to become your whole self. The focus is much less on building real-world skills and way more on an inner, symbolic quest. And what that means is the field that Jung himself created is now facing a massive identity crisis. It's trying to hold on to two ideas that just don't fit together. One where the self just blossoms from the inside, and another, backed by science, where the self is built, bit by bit, through our relationships with each other.
So that leaves us with the ultimate question, doesn't it? Is becoming a healthy, whole person about following some kind of pre-written internal script? Or is it a skill we have to learn, a conversation we absolutely must have, first with our parents and then with others, to literally build a self that can handle the world? That right there is the great debate Jung left for us to figure out.